Askreddit. NSFW Redditors who have gone to the emergency room due to a sexual accident. What was your injury and story? Was fingering a girl and she started bleeding. First thought it was her period and was just embarrassing. So I stopped when I realized and said sorry, but she started freaking out. Said it was nowhere near her period and it was a lot of blood. So I got my buddy to drive us to the ER. I hardly knew her and just felt like I must have punched a hole in her or something terrible. But nope. Doctor informed her it really was a period. He wasn't sure why it started so suddenly or why it was so strong compared to previous, but no, she wasn't dying from bleeding out. Just left me confused. I also went to the ER once because I thought I was bleeding abnormally and had worse than normal cramps. Not sexually triggered or anything, though. Didn't usually have periods because of the birth control I was on. Turns out it was just a period. I felt like a total idiot after that. Luckily my dad was really chill about it and said that if I was worried, it was worth getting checked, and he was happy I was okay. Was the doctor, not the patient. You know those erectile dysfunction treatments that used to be on billboards all over? Longer sex now, etc. Well, as is often joked about, those treatments advise you to go to hospital if it lasts longer than 4 hours. Guy came in, having used those treatments, having had an erection for maybe 6 or 8 hours. His dick was purple, not purple helmeted warrior of love purple, but more holding your breath until you pass out purple. Also very painful for the guy. We called the urology registrar, resident, to ask him to come and look and for advice on what to do in the meantime. His answer? Take a large gauge needle on a big syringe, stick it right into his glans penis and suck out as much blood as you can. Then my shift ended. I did not stick around to watch that one. So I get a text from a guy I work with at 1 AM saying, hey, I won't be able to make it in tomorrow. Naturally I asked why. So he says I'm in the hospital. It's really embarrassing. I press and ask what happened and are you okay? Turns out he was having some hard sex with his girlfriend and went back a little too far, and when he went to go back in he missed the entrance to the cave and hid in between her cooter and thigh, bending his dick in half. I didn't believe him at first, but after some research I found out that it is real. He ended up having to get emergency surgery and was out for 2 weeks. So yeah, to sum it up, my coworker broke his cock. Had that happen to a friend of mine. The embarrassment he had when he finally caved and told me what happened was priceless. Poor guy was out of commission for 6 weeks because of it. Was doing the deed, no thrills, nothing fancy. Afterwards we're sitting on the couch and I feel crampy, so I go into the bathroom and I sit. That's when I have the most painful cramp of all time. My boyfriend comes in to see me full blown hysterical tears, calls my mom who's a nurse whose motto as a child was no bone sticking out or gushing blood. You're fine. She drives down immediately and takes me to the ER. That's when I panic, because if this cold-hearted nurse thinks I need to go pronto, it's serious. When we get there it's slow enough that I pretty much immediately see a doctor, who just happens to be my mom's favorite coworker. Awesome. I then try to explain why it hurts and how it happened when my mom blurts out she was having sex. The doctor didn't flinch much, but I sure did. I wanted to die. Thankfully the embarrassment didn't last long because they gave me amazing painkillers. Long story short, I had 6, had an ovarian cyst burst, horrifyingly painful, went to the doctor and my mom were buddies. Good times. I had really terrible cramps a few times after 6, enough that I had to take pain pills just to sleep. The pain was gone in the next morning both times, and weirdly it didn't happen every time we had sex. I went to the gyno and even had an ultrasound done, but no one could see anything. Fast forward a few months later, one night my boyfriend and I got kind of drunk while watching Baywatch, more like B-Watch, am I right, rock bottom, and decided to keep a good night going with some tipsy sex. The cramping started midway through and didn't let up. Within minutes I was crouched naked on the toilet, no idea why I thought it would help, and couldn't move. My boyfriend called an Uber in lieu of an ambulance. I managed to get myself dressed despite puking every few seconds into a plastic mixing bowl. The poor driver didn't want to take me, since he probably thought I was drunk. and sat there arguing with my boyfriend that I needed an ambulance. I blurted out, "Get me to a hospital now," and he slammed on the gas. That argumentative angel got me there in less than 5 minutes. It turns out an ovarian cyst had burst and torn my uterine wall, so I was bleeding internally. I had to have laparoscopic surgery to remove and cauterize the cyst. Those little benches are no joke. My only regret is never learning what size fruit or ball I could compare it to. I'm also eternally grateful to my boyfriend to being too tired for 10 sex the week before, or I would have been bleeding internally at the far end of the Grand Canyon. After doing the deed I had a massive headache that was like a bomb going off in my head. Wife rushes me to the ER thinking I have busted a brain vessel and having a stroke. Basically says it happens a lot. Just kept me for observation and let me go when I could see straight again. Has never happened again. First beach off a girl I was dating. I don't normally like them too much. I mean, they're nice and all, but not my go-to request. But this one was great. Get close to the end, past the point of no return, and my head just freaking exploded. Tried to hide it, but I literally couldn't see or move. That mother freaker lasted close to a week. Worst part is, I really liked her, but she got too freaked that she'd broken my brain with her magic blowjob. Ed physician here, have seen some stuff. 2 patients wheeled in on the same stretcher. One is a late 40s butch female, the other is a mid-20s lipstick lesbian. They've been playing in fisting, and while the younger woman was inside the other, the older woman orgasmed so hard it broke the younger woman's hand at the wrist. The protruding bones then perforated the walls of the vagina, and she was unable to extricate her hand. The poor woman was wrist deep and both were in pain. I'll let the trauma surgeons and Ed residents fight over that one. I've seen the broken dick 4 times, twice this year strangely enough. Also had to give a few too many intracavernosal injections of neoforprioprism. Things inserted rectally that cannot be removed at home. We had a guy who would put toy cars, Coke glass bottles, and later a clearly Canadian bottle because he was excited it was back on the market. I'm uncircumcised, and I tore my frenulum having sex with a girl one time. It's the little flap of skin that attaches the bottom of the foreskin to the bottom of the head of the penis. Just like the little flap of skin between your lips and gums. The worst part of it was that I didn't notice during sex. I pulled out to come on her stomach, and a torrent of blood and cum spurted everywhere. I looked down and saw it and just awkwardly said, problem. First we thought that she had gotten her period, which was sorta mortifying for both of us. But after a quick inspection, I realized that I was squirting blood out of my dick. I don't know if any of the rest of you have ever squirted blood out of your dicks, but turns out that we've got millions of years of evolution telling us to protect that little freaker at all costs. So I was freaking the freak out. Turns out the doctors can't do anything about it. I put Vaseline on it and waited weeks for it to heal up. It never did, fully. Now it's significantly tighter / weaker than it used to be. Now every time I have sex there's a part of my brain that's terrified that it'll happen again. My wife had just had surgery to remove an ovarian cyst, so after a week of abstinence we were having sex. I felt like I hid something wrong, but she said to not worry about it. Fast forward a couple of hours and she's in a lot of pain. She thinks there might have been a complication with the surgery and us having sex might have caused something bad. Off we go to the one ultrasound later, the intravaginal one with that huge wand. The doctor tells us that she had a bruise on the inside of her vagina. Essentially, I beat a softie up. I remembered the moment, and I asked her about it. She said, well, it did hurt, but I didn't want you to stop. Oy vey. Not so much an injury, but the treatment and aftermath did hurt a lot. Condom came off inside me, and we didn't notice until after we were done. Both of us tried to look or feel for it and couldn't find any trace. I ended up in the ER and the doctor tried removing it with tongs, but it was apparently wedged right up in my cervix and the tongs couldn't reach. So this doctor with hands like Mr. Burns had to lube me up and get in there with his hands to yank it out. It hurt so much, and I was completely mortified as my partner was sat next to me watching and was horrified. I now have a phobia of that happening again, and it makes sex with condoms really awkward for me. Dowd was my 4th year college roommate, along with a couple of other people. He was a strange fellow. I became accustomed to broken beer bottles in the floor, bizarre pornography in the VCR, fesses in places you wouldn't expect it, and frequent visits by the cops and to the emergency room. One night, Doug is being visited by his girlfriend from out of town. They spend most of their time tucked away in Doug's bedroom, doing God knows what. Doug sneaks out and doesn't return for several hours. When he comes back, he has an emergency room bracelet on. After some grilling, he gives up the story. He and his girlfriend are looking for something that might work as a makeshift cock ring. Nothing around except a large padlock. So, she snaps the padlock around his cotton balls. When it becomes clear that it isn't going to work like they thought it would, they go looking for the key. Nowhere to be found. Most of us would have thought about the location of the key before putting it around our junk. So, Doug heads off to the emergency room to get it removed, afraid of losing his giblets to restriction of blood flow. The procedure takes several hours because the doctor has to parade in every other doctor, nurse, intern, and possibly janitor to check out the moron with the padlock stuck around his nuts. Also, they have to take frequent breaks during the sawing off due to the heat that keeps accumulating from the friction and burning his genitals. I had to drive a friend to the ER after he broke his dick during a house party. I was already the scheduled DT for my friends and apparently one of them snuck off with this girl. They were doing the good ol' reverse cowgirl like any other young bucks would, and she ended up zigging, where she shoulder zagged and kinda did a 90-degree body talk. To his explanation, it sorta just popped, and he threw her off him and screamed bloody murder. He tossed on some shorts commando style and told me to drive him to the hospital like now. Drop what I'm doing, get in the car, you're the only one sober, let's go, let's go. Oh, and the girl came along. Her name was Amanda, and she was pretty chill. So it was me driving two barely clothed 20-year-olds in my car to the local hospital 20 minutes away with my dude holding his dick in the backseat and Amanda just consoling him, rubbing his back, making sure he's okay. Telling him, it's going to be alright, you're gonna be fine. Like he hadn't just fractured his penis. So, we make it to the ER, and he just hobbles in and says he broke his dick, please fix it. And they took him in, and I was just alone with this girl I had met that night just waiting for the prognosis. And around an hour later they tell us that he's having emergency surgery because he suffered a severe penile fracture and tore his urethra as well. And basically told us to go home, call someone to pick him up that night. Dude was under the knife and discharged the next day, penis intact and pried only somewhat. Oh, and I also had to call his parents to let them know that their son was having emergency dick surgery and to pick him up in the morning. Could not be a fun call at 12 at night depending on the perspective. They ended up dating for a while after that too. One time I was getting a handy from my girl and she decides she wants to use some lube. She goes and grabs what she thinks is Astroglide, pumps a few shots into her hand, and gets back into the game. It feels absolutely amazing, but I noticed that it smelled a little more chemically than what it should have been. We finish things up and go to bed shortly after. In the morning I wake up to take a pee and feel a slight sting. Turns out the sting was one of many pieces of dried dick skin that were falling off. It seriously looked like lizard skin. What she had used the night before was not lube, but some industrial strength soap I had taken from one of the labs I worked in at Stanford Medical School. Chunks of skin continued to fall off for the next 2 days and I could barely touch it for a week because of how bad it stung. I didn't have to go to the ER, but I certainly learned my lesson. I've told this story a few times. A sex injury literally ended up saving my life. My best friend at the time and I had a few drinks and tensions had been there between us for a long time. She invited me back to her room and tackled me onto her bed, where I hid my head hard off the bedpost. The next morning concussion symptoms started hitting me very heavily, so I went to the ER. On my CORD scan they told me everything looks normal except for your old brain trauma. I have never had brain trauma. About a month later it is diagnosed as a brain tumor that I was not showing symptoms for yet. Had surgery a few weeks later to have it removed, and at that point, found out it was non-cancerous. So basically she freaked my brains out